Hi, Doug Wheeler here with From the Belly. Yeah, this is my podcast, and I'm proud of it. And I'm really excited this morning to be able to talk to, and I'm going to get her name right, that middle name. She and I talked about it before. I'm in my head now, but let's see how I do. And Sarah will tell me if I don't pronounce her correctly. Sarah Busey Klingler. And
Perfect.
you got to get that with the Klingler, you got to get that L in there.
Absolutely.
When I first reached out to Sarah, maybe 6 weeks ago, I got all the emails set up and I got it all set up and I thought I really want to talk to this woman and everything. And then it came back, bounced back, and I'm like, oh, what's going on here? And I didn't put the L in there. So I got
It's
that
a
L in there and
very,
boom.
very common mistake.
All right. And Sarah comes all the way, to me at least, on the West Coast from Akron, Ohio. So that's definitely closer to where I grew up. So, how did I meet Sarah? I met Sarah through Facebook. And I gave up on Facebook maybe 6, 7 months ago. And then I came back. And I'm really glad that I did because I'm meeting cool people like Sarah. So, we had a Zoom chat for 25, 30 minutes, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And she said, yeah, I'll be on your podcast and let's kick it from there. So that's what we're doing. So where I wanted to drop in is probably a place that you'll be like, that's an interesting place to start. Just on your Facebook page, I see your education background, and I'm fascinated by Faith Academy to Taylor University to Malone University to Northern Seminary. So if you could start and walk us through that. And I'm really interested in that journey because this is going to tell us a lot about you and
Sure.
who you've arrived to be today. And I'm also really curious about your seminary experience because you and I chatted a bit about that, and it was a very formative time. So it's all yours, Sarah.
All right. Yeah. So Faith Academy is an international school for predominantly missionary kids, and it's located in the Philippines, close to the capital. Most people probably know Manila, which is the largest city. Quezon City is where I spent a lot of time, just right outside, kind of on the outskirts of Manila. So I went to Faith Academy from seventh grade, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, and then 12th. Didn't go there in 11th because we came home to the States for like a home service furlough year. So my parents, yes, my parents were missionaries. They were church planters. The first year that we were there, we lived out in a very provincial area. So myself and then my younger sister, my sister who's 3 years younger than me, actually attended boarding school. So
Oh, wow.
they do have boarding school, dormitories, if you will, for students whose parents don't live close enough to the school to
Hmm.
be able to be bussed in. And so that was a very interesting experience. Probably went a lot better for me because I tend to be more extroverted and independent. It was a lot harder on my younger sister. She was only 10 at the
Hmm.
time and very
So you're away.
quiet.
So you're away from your parents.
Yeah. Yeah. And you live with, other students, you have dorm parents that kind of, obviously supervise and all of that kind of thing. So that was just that for seventh grade. And because my sister had such a hard time, we really probably should have been there one more year. But my parents decided, no, this is not going to happen. And so they ended up moving in closer to the school so that we would be able to be bussed in the remainder of our time there. So we lived at home, then we got
Hmm.
bussed into the school. So the school was unique in that there were MKs, which is the shortened form of missionary kid. So there were MKs there from all across the world. It was really amazing. I had friends from Germany and Korea and Canada and just all over the place. The language that was spoken was English. It was very much a Western education and it just was very unique. I definitely believe that a lot of my time there was very formative in making me the person that I am today. Those teenage years are really significant as
Hmm.
you're, just developing who you are as a person. I've always been very interested in having friends from a lot of different spaces, different cultures, and even different types of denominations. So everyone that was there because their parents were missionaries, Protestant missionaries, but the
Okay.
denominations varied. We had Assemblies of God, we had Baptist, we had non-denominational, we had charismatic, we had, just the whole shebang.
And
So
I would assume the kids mixed well from those denominations, those varied denominations, but sometimes parents don't mix really well from those
yeah,
spaces. But the kids, I think,
correct.
do, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It didn't mean really much to us at all, right?
Right.
It was it was a conservative space, a conservative Christian space. We had chapel and we had Bible class and that kind of thing. For me, overall, it was a really positive experience. I got involved in a lot of activities. It was a regular school. I was a cheerleader for a few years, yearbook editor my senior year. So that was Faith Academy. After Faith Academy, my parents and the rest of my family stayed on in the Philippines, and I
Mm.
came back to the States to go to college. And so that's where Taylor University comes into play. And for anyone who's listening that doesn't know, Taylor is, again, a conservative Christian college located literally in the middle of nowhere, Indiana. I mean,
I've been to the campus once.
okay.
Yeah,
It's just surrounded by cornfields. There's just
absolutely.
nothing there. It's funny because at the time I was there, it could have changed, I don't know, but there was one pizza place that everybody went to
Everybody
because that
went
was
to.
the only
Had
pizza
to,
place.
right?
And so that's what it was called. It was called Top It, the only pizza place in town. Top It. So I was at Taylor for 2 years. My roommate, I roomed with a fellow MK, who
Mm.
today even is one of my dearest friends. So we were roommates, and I didn't have a bad experience at Taylor overall. I might have different things to say about the school today, but my
Mm.
experience was pretty good. I was studying English education, so I thought was going to be a high school English teacher. That was the trajectory I thought that I was going down.
Mm-hmm.
During the summer before I went to Taylor, I met a guy counseling at our church summer camp, and we fell in love, and we carried on a long distance relationship during my time at Taylor until finally my heart just couldn't take it anymore. And so I moved back to Akron, where he was located. That wasn't the only reason. I also wanted to change my major to elementary and special education. And Taylor didn't offer special ed, they didn't have a strong special ed program at the time. So moved back home, went to a Quaker affiliated school called Malone, and that's in Canton, Ohio,
Never
which
heard
is
of
also
Malone.
where the Football Hall of Fame is located.
Right on.
So I was at Malone. I ended up having to do an extra year because of the change of major. So I was there for 3 years, but I was a commuter student. I didn't live on campus. So I juggled work and school and boyfriend, and he eventually became my husband. So I think it was a good choice. So, yeah, so that's Faith Academy and Taylor and Malone. And the last school is much more recent. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't mind, giving my age or whatever. I graduated from college from Malone in 97. So fast forward all the way to 2018,
Oh, goodness.
which is when I actually started a very different journey than I ever thought I would be on, which was to attend seminary.
Mm.
So I did teach school for about I think 7 years. I
Oh,
taught
wow. Wow.
elementary school, and all that time was in private Christian schools.
Okay.
I really enjoyed it. I had wonderful students, some that were challenging, but just great students, great families. A lot of them have friend requested me, on Facebook, and I'm friends with a lot of my former students,
That's
some of
wild.
now who I taught as like kindergarten first graders, and now they're in their later 20s, early
Right
30s.
on. Right on.
So I did that, had my own family, and decided to stay home with my kids, and had the privilege and opportunity to do that, and actually homeschooled my own kids. Still have one that I'm doing that. She's a ninth grader, but something just stirred in me. Like I felt in my own spirit, like there was something else that I was supposed to be doing. Just, wasn't really exactly sure what that was. Coming out of conservative Christian spaces, going to seminary or any of that kind of thing, that never crossed my mind, just because
Mm.
that was a male only space in my
Oh, wow.
mind, in my upbringing.
Hmm.
That just wasn't something that women did. But
Mm.
I started down a road of deconstruction, deconstructing some of the things that I had been taught about faith and the Bible and different things. And my eyes were open to the fact that actually there's space for everybody in the church, in all areas of leadership. So I've always loved the church, always, have been involved in teaching Sunday school and being in choir and different things, but never thought anything about like, oh, I could be a pastor or, teach mixed groups or anything like that.
And Sarah, were those denominational churches? Were they non-denominational or both? Or
Yeah, I was in predominantly non-denominational church, but
Bible church type, community church type settings?
yeah, and I think as is true of most non-denominational churches, there's sort of a Baptist, conservative Baptist foundation, if you will. So yeah, that was my space predominantly was in non-denom
Okay.
spaces. So anyway, it's a long story about how, I eventually did get to seminary, but my eyes were open more and more to the gifts that I have leading and teaching. And it was actually my husband who started nudging me. He's like, I think you need to go to seminary.
Well, you're like, what?
Right. And it's funny because a lot of my friends that I met in seminary who are women were just astonished that it was my husband who was actually the one telling me, I really think you should go, because a lot of times it's hard for women if their husbands aren't necessarily in that same space. Maybe they're still, more conservative or still struggle with women in the church, in their place in the church, and sometimes they have to really do a sales pitch to get their husband on board with them going to seminary. Mine was the complete opposite.
Well, you married the right man.
I did.
Maybe
I
according to
absolutely
some,
did.
he wasn't the proper man, but you married the right man. Now, before we get you into seminary, I'm interested in this time of deconstruction.
Sure.
Was that done primarily by yourself? Was that done with, be it your partner or other people? I mean, tell us a bit about that journey of deconstructing.
Yeah. I actually had a few eye-opening experiences that caused me to really take pause about a lot of the things that I had been taught, not just about necessarily like doctrinal, although that was definitely part of it, doctrinal kinds of things.
Right.
But even just about the church itself, right? The structure of the church, the way that the church operates, that kind of thing. So I had two separate but running concurrently abuse situations that I found myself in the middle of as an advocate for the person or people being abused. And the abuse was happening by highly regarded people within the church structure. Pastors, missionaries. One was a woman in a domestic violence kind of a marriage who was getting absolutely horrific counsel from a pastor. The other situation involved abuse at an orphanage overseas and the cover up of that abuse by a well-known missionary. So anyways, I just found myself in the middle of both of these situations, just floundering, like just stunned about how this could have happened. And people were just awful in terms of their response to those who were coming forward telling about their abuse. The people who heard the stories were more interested in siding with the perpetrators and protecting the perpetrators and not tearing down the institutions instead of really caring for the victims. And so that just set me on a journey that rocked my world, for lack of a better term. It really rocked just every ounce of everything I had been taught. I just started to question.
So you didn't have any experiences prior to this of all these Christian circles that you grew up in. This was foreign to you.
Right. Yeah. I had had very good and loving parents. I didn't necessarily want to move to the Philippines when I was almost 13. But I didn't have, any type of a bad relationship with my parents. They weren't abusive. I didn't know anybody during all my years. I didn't know anybody, or at least I didn't think I knew anybody
Yeah.
who was harmed or abused. But then, of course, once your eyes are opened, then you start seeing the
Yeah.
reality.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So that really started my deconstruction. And that would have been right around like 2016, 17, right in that time frame. And I've really been deconstructing ever since. I'm not sure I'll ever stop, to be honest. I call myself a reconstructing deconstructor.
I had that written down. It's one of your taglines. And I went, okay, talk about that, but you're telling the stories.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just think that it's important that we continue to be curious and open to the fact that we might have gotten things wrong, or people who have taught us or discipled us might have gotten things wrong. I appreciate so much the faith foundation I was given, care and compassion that was handed down to me by my parents. I mean, my parents just very compassionate people. So those are my foundational pieces of my life that have been very important. But the house that I had built needed to come down. Parts of it needed to come down. And parts of it are still coming down. As I learn from other people, as I research and study, as I look even into my own self about what I believe to be true, for example, about the person of Jesus. If what I believe about Jesus is true, then there are other things that I have been taught or things that I believe that aren't congruent with the person of Jesus. And I need to figure out why.
Walter Brueggemann, a hero of mine, his typologies with this were orientation, disorientation, and reorientation.
Yeah,
So
that's
you were
good.
yeah, it is good, isn't it? So you were disoriented. I think of these deconstructing seasons as the wording you said, essentially I deconstructed my faith. And then I think, yeah, and is it true to say, but along with that is something's deconstructing you.
Mm,
There's the
yeah,
mutuality of there's something beyond you that's
yes,
deconstructing you, be it God or however we want to frame that.
yeah, yeah.
And
And I
and
think
you
just,
participate, you participated with that, you went with that, and maybe there's people, I would assume there's people that they're getting invited into that space and they're resisting it, and I understand that, because we're not talking about just a belief system that lives in your brain. We're talking about, in one sense, a person's identity, right? We're talking about
yeah,
in relationships and family and the things that people lose when they disorient.
yes,
It's not just an abstract intellectual exercise.
correct.
It's a life change.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely would have been a lot easier just to, stay where I was at and not start down the path that I did. But I think for me, again, because my eyes were opened to some really horrendous things happening at the hands again of those who were supposed to be in positions of, authority, spiritual authority. And I started thinking even about that whole situation, like pastors and these leaders who are in authority over me. Like, I believe I have the Holy Spirit. Is that not good enough? Why do I need, to have this man, because it's always a man in those spaces, who, doesn't even have accountability all the time,
You bet.
who often is power hungry? Not saying all, but I've run into an awful lot of these pastors who just love power, and are brash and not compassionate. It just doesn't make any sense to me anymore, that I would look to that person
Okay.
for
Yeah.
advice and answers and all of my, questions that I might have about faith. Like, why would I take it to that person? So,
And Sarah is on the mission field and in other Christian circles, parachurch work, but also within the
sure.
church. Is this decreasing? Do you believe this is decreasing in number of these type of leaders, or you're more in touch with it than I am? It's one of the reasons I've started this podcast back up. And I didn't introduce it this way, but kind of the theme is, let's see, how do we put that? Why not church? Or maybe why church?
Mm-hmm.
So is this still prevalent? Is it still up and running?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if it's worse or just that we now have the opportunity of exposing it via platforms that more people can know about, such as
Yeah.
social media, investigative journalists, etc. But if you follow, which I do, if you follow some of these investigative Christian journalists who are exposing this
Mm,
underbelly of the church and missions, there's stories every day, like
really?
literally every day,
Every day. Wow.
every day. Yeah. And so it's really disheartening on one hand, but on another hand, I'm really thankful for it because I think that it's better to know the truth of what's happening and what's out there so that people are not always as taken aback necessarily as I think I was. I was just so dumbfounded that this could
Mm.
happen. And I want people to be safe. Unfortunately, some of these spaces just are not safe for women and children and other vulnerable populations, especially.
And Sarah, who was you during that time, um, this vulnerable time for you of disorientation? Who was safe to you? Like who did you lean into?
My partner, for sure. And it was honestly lonely. It was a lonely time because most of my closest friends were very much still steeped in, the world of white evangelicalism. And I felt like I was swimming against the current, swimming upstream against the current to even get them to listen to me, to try to understand me. I lost a lot of friends.
Mm,
When I stopped attending the church that was honestly like pretty much my home church my entire life, even in the Philippines, when we were in the Philippines, I still considered that church my home base. They were
mm.
my parents' main supporters.
So you were sent out from them, that church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, losing
Wow.
that space and all the relationships, that go along with that was really hard. But I found a lovely, lovely new community at my seminary.
Talk about that.
Yeah. So I attended Northern Seminary, which is right outside of Chicago. It was, an online program. So I had class once a week, usually Monday nights, and I would get on and there was the teacher, the professor, and all the students. And then once a year, we would get together actually in person for a
Hmm.
week
Hmm.
long intensive. So one of the reasons I chose Northern is because they were very much affirming of women in ministry, in any area of ministry, in leadership. And you didn't even have to have like a calling,
Mm.
to be a certain thing, like a pastoral calling or whatever.
And
Because
what do you mean?
honestly,
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by a
well,
calling?
I hesitate to use the word because I think it's been abused.
Sure.
People are like, God called me to this or that or the other. I have women friends who are like, I'm dating, and this one guy that I'm dating, he's like, well, God called me to be your husband, and it's sort of
Ooh.
like, well, he didn't call me to be your wife.
And if you did, Sarah might have something to say about it.
Exactly. So anyway, yeah, so I went to seminary really not sure why necessarily I was going to seminary. I didn't have a specific goal in mind at the end. I just really felt, again, in the middle of this deconstruction, like I needed to have a place that was safe, that I could talk about things, that I could really dig into the Bible, look at it through different lens than I had been taught, to hear from different people of their perspectives. And I really wanted to learn how to write out the things that I was thinking and feeling as a deconstructor in a way that would be compelling for other people who were maybe out there floundering and didn't yet have
Interesting.
words or a safe space, safe people. So I got to study under some incredible, incredible scholars who just changed my life, honestly. They told me it was okay to question. It was okay not to have answers. It was okay to doubt and, be floundering a little
And to be
bit.
and to be
It was
and,
okay.
and to be human.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You can
That
be
I
a
didn't have
human in
to
this.
imagine.
Yeah, imagine being a human. I can actually be a human,
Yeah.
which is chock full of conflicts and contradictions and all of those things. We're fine here at From the Belly because it's just me. I'm fine with name dropping. Do you want to name drop?
Well,
And
I would
maybe
really
the,
love to just shout out the person who was most impactful, which is Scott McKnight. He is just world renowned New Testament scholar. He's written, I don't know, 70, 80 books.
my goodness.
And he he's just try not to get choked up. He's just a really good man, not just an academic and some power hungry man, which I've run into far too many of those, unfortunately, over the years now. Platforms women. He uses his own space to help platform women because he recognizes the privilege that he has. He was available to his students, I could text him right now and he would
Wow.
answer, you know.
Could you, does a story come to mind of time and interaction, a conversation, time in class or whatever that just kind of stands out in your mind as you probably won't forget this until you get 85 and maybe you won't forget it then? But it's like, that was an encounter with Scott and it was special. Do you have a little story?
I don't know about a story, but I will say that he kind of used one of the classes I was in. We were sort of his guinea pigs. He was testing out some material that he had written on the book
Mm.
of Revelation.
Wow.
And he kind of did a survey at the beginning when we were starting the class. And he asked, kind of what our experience had been with the book of Revelation, and a lot of us had similar experiences. Like we were terrified,
Terrified.
of the book, the whole left behind,
Oh, God.
you know,
God.
the tribulation and left behind and the beasts and the antichrist and the 666 and just all the feelings. Some of us were talking about, oh yeah, I remember one time I was in my house and I couldn't find my parents and I thought, oh my God, was I left behind? Did the
Wow.
rapture happen? So anyway, I really remember the class because
Wow.
I think my jaw was like this the whole time as this was a 10-week class or whatever on Revelation. And I had never, ever in my life heard it taught in the way that he taught it. And he actually ended up then using that material and going on to write a book.
Well, there you go.
It's called Revelation for the Rest of Us.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
And you'd
it
recommend that book?
highly, highly, highly,
Oh, wow. We can
highly
think of you,
recommend
Sarah,
it.
and think, wow, you were foundational to that work. Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool. That's
Yeah.
cool.
And then I do have one other quick thing
Please,
I could say.
please.
I was in a class one time with him and I think we were talking about hell. And, it's a difficult topic. And I just appreciated him saying at different points, it's not as clear as we've been taught. And we need to really consider and be open to that there are other other ways of seeing this. He wasn't pushing any particular theological understanding. He was just, again, coming in with a spirit of openness and curiosity. And sometimes we just don't really know. But here's what we do know: God is a God of mercy, that kind of thing.
And so this was very freeing for Sarah.
Very. Very. Yeah. And so my seminary experience I think it helped me to decide and determine that I still wanted to follow Jesus, that I still found my hope in Jesus, but I lost a lot of the trappings, I would call them, of needing certainty about everything, being so dogmatic about every little thing, and just, again, that curiosity, openness, being willing to listen to people and learn from people who have different perspectives. I think that seminary really did that for me. And I came away from that experience with some of the most incredible friendships. Actually, next week, I'm going to meet up with several of the women in my seminary cohort. We're going to get together for a weekend, and I'm so looking forward to it.
So looking forward to that.
And you Scott and his wife are coming.
Oh,
Scott and his wife are coming. So, yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Yep.
And you graduated in 2022?
Correct.
Sarah, tell us about your work now, because your shirt says it all. Resist. You're very outspoken. I could take us right now to Facebook. I jumped on it this morning to get current, and I'm like, she's current, she's active, people are responding, mostly women, some men. I didn't go all the way through, but this is what captured, by the way, audience, this is what captured me to Sarah. She popped up, and you can add a friend, and some people respond and some people don't, and you kindly did, and it gave me a little more access into Sarah's work, and I'm just like, I got to talk to this woman, man. She's pushing back. So tell us about your current work. What are you resisting? Sure. What are you pushing against? How pissed off are you? How hurt are you for the people that are being hurt? Where's Sarah living these days?
Sure. So I have my paid work, and then I have my unpaid work. So I'll talk a little bit about my paid work first, which started out as unpaid, but then anyway. So I work for a nonprofit. It's a very small little kind of grassroots nonprofit, and it's called MK, Missionary Kid.
There you go.
Safety Net. A safety net.
Okay.
So I told you that my experience as an MK was very positive. I mean, there were certain things, of course, I experienced that were hard. I think probably any time that you move overseas to a different country, you have a different culture, just all the things, there's going to be hard there. And I did live through a couple of coup attempts. So, It wasn't all just roses.
Maybe throw a few typhoons in there too.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But overall, my experience was good. But one of the things that I've come to realize is how important it is to understand that two things can actually be true at once. So on one hand, I had a very positive experience as a missionary kid. On the other hand, there were some of my peers who didn't have positive experiences, and in fact, they experienced abuse. So the organization that I work for helps missionary kids who are adults now, helps them through their healing journey as they're coming to recognize that they've been abused. The trauma has impacted them often for decades. And now what do they do? Because this is a very niche kind of a group, right? Yeah. I mean, MKs, I don't have any idea how many MKs there are or have been across the generations, but it's not like, millions and millions of people. It's a pretty small group. And again, missionaries themselves are viewed as these super spiritual heroes of the faith. So when people try to come and push against that in any way, shape, or form, there's hell to pay, to be honest. And so the missionary kids now that are adults need to have somewhere to go. People who can understand their situation because it's very unique. You're isolated in many ways. There's not like you can just go and report to your local police station,
More true.
or if you take it to your principal at your school or something like that, oftentimes there's just so much pushback.
You got it.
And again, as is true with any survivor of sexual abuse in particular, you don't often have words or don't have any way of expressing when you're abused as a child until you're much, 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 much older. And then you have the stigma of, well, why didn't you say something back then? Well, you're a child. These are people who are supposed to be safe and protecting you. There's just so many things. So anyway, we help provide a sense of community for these adult missionary kids, just a safe place to even tell their story if they feel they want to do that. We help them try to figure out options of ways that they can attempt to seek justice. Not easy at all, especially because it happened in another country. You're dealing with mission organizations often where leadership has changed hands tons of times. It's just a lot. But there have been some cases, there have been few, but there have been some cases where there has been justice served.
And these folks that have been hurt, is this kind of word of mouth is the way they find you all, like referrals? I mean, how does that?
Yeah,
like you
a
said,
lot of them do Google searches or
wow,
type into Facebook like missionary kid, and so that way, and then word of mouth, a lot of people come to us because a friend told them that, about us. So it's not, we're not located in a specific place. Right. It's all pretty much virtual, online, although we try to have some get-togethers with, small groups. But, these are lives that have been impacted really forever. They've been harmed at the hands of missionaries, and a lot of them leave the faith, unsurprisingly, but then they get pushback because they've left the faith. It's awful the way that they're treated. And other people that I've heard talk about the abuse they've experienced by pastors and other spiritual leaders say that the abuse itself was horrific, but the secondary trauma of trying to go to somebody to get them to listen, to get some compassion, and then being pushed away or being silenced or further marginalized, like that is even worse to them. So we are not a Christian or religious affiliated organization. We want everybody to feel safe and welcome. So we have people within our group who are still practicing Christians. We have atheists, we have seekers, spiritual seekers. We have just a wide variety of people, and we will never be a religious affiliated group, because how would somebody feel safe if they have completely given up on religion because of what happened to them?
I'm curious, do some of these folks come from other types of faith other than Christian faith, or is it really Christian missionary?
Yeah, it's predominantly, I can't think of anybody who, like, all the parents were Protestant missionaries.
Okay.
All over the world, not just from one particular location.
Right.
Like I was in the Philippines, but we've got, people who are in Europe or Asia, Africa, like everywhere. And across all denominational spectrums, across generations. Our board president was abused as a child in the 50s, I think, in Africa. So it just keeps happening, though. We've got 70-year-olds and we've got 20-year-olds.
Right on. Do you see a connection between abusive leaders in white evangelical churches and what we're currently seeing happening with abusive leaders in our government?
This is what I'm resisting.
Okay. Talk about that, Sarah.
Well, so I talked about my paid work. I work for MK Safety Net as the project manager.
Okay.
But my unpaid work is coming alongside of people who have been harmed in church spaces, mainly women, who have felt ostracized, who have felt belittled, their gifts haven't been recognized, they've been abused, experienced spiritual abuse or other forms of abuse. So people just need, again, people need safe people. People need people who will listen without judgment and criticism, without spiritual bypassing or trying to give them nice Christian platitudes, you know. So that's what I do. I guess you could say I pastor in that way. And I think that one of the main reasons why a lot of these women have been harmed is because of this idea of authority, hierarchy, and male domination in these church spaces. So, you know, we're taught in my previous faith tradition, that a man is to lead, right? Church, home, it's the man's job to be the leader. The buck stops there. All the decision making, you know, if you have a husband and wife and they can't come to some kind of a decision, it's always the husband who makes the decision, you know. And in the church, we're taught to look to one man, the pastor. He's the spiritual authority. He's the one who has the answers, and all the power kind of funnels up to that man. Now, if it's a good man, passionate man, all right, it maybe would be okay. But still, you are a peon down here, you know, in the pew, a peon in the pew. I'm gonna coin that term.
I was going to say that might be your book. That might be your book.
And so, even though it's not necessarily said aloud, women are marginalized in these spaces. Women are taught to be seen and not heard. You look to your husband, you look to your male pastor. It's this hierarchy of power. And when one person has the power and there's not really any accountability around them, and that person starts getting a big head, or maybe they were a narcissist to begin with, all kinds of things can happen. But you
Sarah,
don't question. You don't question, because that's your spiritual authority that God put in place over you. And so even when they do things that are wrong, you don't question. You take it, you suffer.
Got me thinking about a question that I've wanted to ask somebody, and it's time for me to ask. You're the right person to ask. So let me set the table here for a moment and see if I can bring this to within a minute or so. I've seen in these types of churches, well, let's just use the death of John MacArthur. Okay. Now, you were quite active, by the way, folks. If you're on Facebook and you want to go and check Sarah out, she's quite active about that, and she got a lot of responses. But I'm going to use that as a prototype of those type of churches. Okay.
Yep.
I've noticed, as a therapist for 35 years, doing a coaching model now, but still working with people. A lot of people not from the Christian space, but I started out, that was my referral base until I started doing some work with folks. And then this is in the Seattle area, and I was getting phone calls from different churches, and their elders were calling, going, "Can I have a chat with you?" And I'm just like, "Sure. What would you like to talk about?" And then, within 5 minutes, it was getting quite heated. And, the whole Mark Driscoll thing and the Mars Hill thing, I got a few phone calls from them, and I fell off of their referral list. But what I've noticed, Sarah, I want to get to this. What I've noticed in those types of churches, I've been in the room where I've experienced this, that some of the women were more of a fundamentalist than their husband. So as you set up, and I understand what you're saying, you set up this male-dominated space. One who doesn't know about these spaces could be listening in going, wow, those are women that probably still aren't allowed to stand up in church or speak or whatever. They just sit there. I've noticed an aggression, and I've experienced it because I worked with a lot of couples, and the man was quite browbeaten. He was the spiritual leader, I guess, on paper.
Right.
But man, and I confronted a lot of that, and it's just like, help me understand that, because I know that's still I mean, if some of those folks in John MacArthur's church, if they get on your Facebook page, you're not just going to have maybe men coming after you. You're going to have some women
Right.
coming after you. Help me
Yes.
understand that. And we don't have much time, and we
Yeah.
probably need to do part two. But help me understand that.
Well, I think when you are so steeped sometimes in those spaces, you don't realize how toxic the water is that you're swimming in. You just think that it's very normal to, have a male leader, to be a submissive wife or submissive congregant or whatever. And if you start pulling at that thread of, let's say, complementarianism, okay, which
Mhm,
is
mhm, mhm.
basically what we're talking about with a man in charge, there's a fear there that when you start pulling on that thread and the whole thing's going to unravel, right? And so
Mm,
instead of being willing to even tug a little bit at that thread, you just start digging in your heels and you will vociferously just defend it to the nth degree
mm,
because that's safe, right? It's
mhm,
safe. You know your place, even if you don't always love being submissive. You know your place. It feels like that's God's will. And people who question God's will, you need to let them know in no uncertain terms that they are going against everything that you hold dear.
So a woman in that space, a woman who's expressing herself with that kind of aggression and certainty, and I mean all of that. Many times, much more than the husband. I've seen where he's. I mean, really, just in the room, he's just sitting there, and
Yep.
she's really wound up with. So what I hear you saying is that somebody is maybe tugging on, be it the therapist or somebody else or some
Mm-hmm.
other space in her life. But even if not, she's going to be a fortified wall to keep this whole thing intact.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
That is my take on it.
Well,
That's my take. Now, I have had more pushback on things that I post, I would say, overall, from women than
oh,
men.
okay, so
Case
this
in, yep,
fits.
yeah.
Okay, wow. Do you know of any authors, any books that we could direct people, and even myself included, that have really looked into this, that have kind of researched this, and
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, which is
that's
really interesting. Maybe I need to maybe I need to
that.
consider doing some research.
I mean, I'm sure there's a dissertation out there, and people are, but that's in an academic circle. But um, that's a space that maybe needs to
Yeah.
really be to.
Well, and then again tying that in with what we see happening in our government, right?
Right. Thank you for bringing
Again,
us back to that.
it's the often women who are pushing back against me when I'm calling out the evil and corruption and for what it is. But there again, if you've been taught to
Mm,
only Christians can only vote Republican, which in these spaces that is often the messaging. You can only vote for Republican to really be a faithful follower of Jesus, which now I think is absolutely absurd, of course, considering what we have going on
mm,
at the highest levels of government, with this clown show, wicked clown show. Anyway, so they're pushing back against that because, again, you've been taught this is the truth. This is the way it is. And there's no questioning it. There's no, if again, if you're being taught that by your pastor or your Sunday school teacher, or if your husband even tells you,
and if your reading of the Bible tells you that, let's just, I mean, if you read the Bible
yeah,
and it tells you that, I mean, boy, you
that
talking about some ammunition.
yeah, and the president is just like the leader in a church or the leader in the home.
Boy, that's
A
so true.
man with power, you have to listen, you don't question. They even go so far as to almost say that the president is anointed by and called up by God,
Oh, they've gone that far, correct? I mean, you
right?
listen to people talk about the assassination attempt,
Yeah.
and that he was saved by God, and he claims that, and whatever. It's just, yeah, it's just,
And it doesn't matter even if the person is doing things that are wicked. They're still the leader, somehow God is going to work through that leader. That's
Yeah,
the understanding.
and you and I could talk for another hour, and I'm sure if we had Scott McKnight with us or some of your colleagues, some of your classmates to talk about this end times mentality,
Yeah.
it's trying to rush that process.
Yeah.
This is a very condensed way to say it and probably too simplistic, but you know, let's just make so much chaos and so much hell here, and we'll get Jesus back much sooner.
Yep.
And so
And we're
it really is.
and we're going to heaven, so we're going to be fine.
We're going to be fine, and if you do the numbers, not too many people are going to be there. I mean, not too many people are going to be there, but that's okay with somebody because they're going to be there.
Right. Yeah,
What
exactly.
about your neighborhood? What about the majority of people in your neighborhood? What about them? It's like, well, it's on them, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, gosh, Sarah, we've got more to talk about. Would you be open to not only doing another one of these down the road, just you and I, but also coming into what we at From the Belly call our round table, and we would bring you in with another person.
Okay.
And we might even I think there's a few episodes where I think we had 3 people at the table and fourth was me. And sometimes I'll ask a guest, "Hey, bring somebody with you. Bring somebody with you that'll just add to this conversation." So
Yeah, sure. I'd be open to that.
that's cool. Cool. Um, well, I'm sad to say that we're right at an hour. How do you want to close this out, Sarah? The people that you will send this to that know you, people that don't know you, people on my side of the fence that possibly don't know you and don't know about your
Yeah.
work? How do you want to close this out here?
Well, I think it's always wise to end on hope,
Mm,
right? To end in hope. There's just so much going on in the world, in our country, in the church, that I think it's easy to just get so discouraged and disgusted and overwhelmed. I know I get that way for sure. But what I've really been trying to do recently is just to find moments of hope, places, spaces, people that can give me hope. And of course, as a follower of Jesus, my ultimate hope is in Jesus. But I don't want to be so heavenly minded that I'm no earthly good, right?
mm,
And so hope has to live and breathe and be here present. And I'm getting ready to go to a protest this evening. Going to wear my resist sign, carry my sign. This is the Good Trouble rally.
okay. In Akron?
It's a suburb. I'm going to one of the suburbs of Akron, and I think it's the 5th anniversary. I'm sorry if I get this wrong, but of the death of John Lewis.
Oh boy.
And so we're getting
Right.
into some good trouble today.
Boy.
And boy, I tell you, being in those spaces, looking at people of all ages,
Mm,
genders, races, sexuality, the whole shebang, coming together, people who I know are resisting and pushing back against
mm,
the evil and corruption that is happening in our nation. Boy, that just brings me hope.
wow.
And so I just encourage people to get in spaces where you can find hope, whatever that looks like. Find a person
Mm,
that will bring some hope back into your life if you've kind of lost that. Or even just for me, even getting out in nature sometimes, I just look
mhm,
around and remember how big the universe is,
mm.
and that actually gives me a sense of stability and hope.
That's wonderful. Sarah, can people reach out to you?
Sure.
Tell us how people can reach out to you. Would you give us the URL again for, if you're cool with it, the MK Project? Was it
Yeah.
mkproject.org?
Yeah, mksafetynet.org
Oh, safety net.
is
Okay.
our website.
Okay.
You can find me on Facebook.
Yep. You
Um,
sure can.
most of my posts I put as public, because I want people to be able, even if they don't necessarily follow me or are friends with me, you can still see my stuff because they're
Hmm.
public. And I mean, I'm on most of the other social media platforms like Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky. I do
Oh,
have an X account, but I don't use it anymore because,
okay.
you know, I don't,
Yeah.
yeah,
No. No.
don't care for the owner of
Yeah.
that platform.
Yeah. You have the cringe effect there. I have a question. In your day-to-day life, how do you think about Jesus? How do you think about this invisible? Let's say I'm a person with zero faith and zero orientation, and I say, yeah, how do you think about this invisible person that you say exists or exists in spirit form? And how do you think about and relate to the person of Jesus for
Well,
Sarah?
first I'm going to have to put in a plug for a book that I'm part of that's coming out in September.
Well, please do.
It's called Jesus Was Not What We Expected, but Better Than We Imagined. It comes out September 23rd, and I have 2 chapters that I wrote in the book
Yeah.
along with a bunch of my seminary friends.
Awesome.
Scott
Awesome.
McKnight does the foreword. We've got some great
Oh,
endorsements.
that's
So
beautiful.
so check that out because I think that will help a lot of people answer that question. But for me, on the day to day, I really do think of the actual person of Jesus, not as this ethereal God up in the clouds kind of thing that is so far removed. But I really do think about how Jesus lived his life because I think that it gives us the perfect example of how we are supposed to operate as people here on the earth. And so I look at Jesus and the tables that he sat at with so many different people, so many different types of people that were ostracized, that were othered. And I just always kind of have that in the back of my mind about Jesus' interaction with the marginalized, the oppressed, and the whole UWJD, which, we used to wear on
Right.
bracelets and other things. What would Jesus do? I really do try to take that to heart because if I say I follow Jesus, that isn't just an academic in my brain kind of thing. Following is an
Mhm.
action. And so through my own actions, that's how I think
Mhm.
about and go through that process of thinking about following Jesus. So whether it's taking a friend to a chemo appointment or donating to certain causes that I feel are compassionate and helping people, or just my interactions with my kids. Am I really doing what I say I do, which is follow Jesus?
So, Sarah, this metaphor of table, you see yourself sitting at the Lord's table.
Yeah, and I want to bring other people to that table that don't look like me, that don't even believe like me, that don't love like me. You know what I mean? Like people of all different genders,
Mhm.
sexual expressions, races, religions. I want to be such a compelling follower of Jesus that people would sit at the table with me.
And what if somebody is at the door and you've brought them, and right before they go through the doorway, they can kind of peek in and see this table you speak of and these good people that you know, and they hesitate and say, I don't want to go in. And you say, no, come in, come in. You're going to be welcome to the table. And they say, "Oh, but that looks like church. I don't want to come in. I've had a terrible experience, or my neighbor had a terrible experience, or just what I've heard. No, I mean, you'll get me in there, the door will close. I don't want to go to that table." What do you say to that person?
Well, I don't know exactly what I would say, but here is the reality of the things that I do. I am not currently in any church. Okay.
Okay.
So I've followed Jesus my whole life, been in church the majority of my life, went to seminary, have a seminary degree. But for this reason, I am not currently in church because I feel like the opportunity to bring people to the table is greater outside of the church,
Oh,
at
that's
least for
interesting.
me
It's
at least for
interesting.
me. And so that I think helps to create a sense of safety for people. And there will still be people who are hesitant.
Well, sure,
And
but
I,
now I'm thinking about the person at the doorway. I'm imagining that, and let's have them say, "So, Sarah, this isn't a church," and you say, "Oh no, no, this is just a table coming in. This is a group of dear friends of mine. I know
yep,
these people. These people that I've been vetted. These are good people." And the person goes, I'll come in then. I'd love to come join you. Hmm. Oh,
yeah,
so it's not a church? No, it's not a church.
yep.
And I speak as one who just joined a church. I know that could be a stumbling block. We'll use that language. That could be a stumbling block for a person that I meet on the street that doesn't want anything to do with church, and then they realize that I go there. And I realized that. And I thought about that when I rejoined the church. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
the last thing I want is to be a separator and divisive in my own neighborhood or whatever. But it's a place that I was drawn to. So it's just interesting. It's been a
Well,
great
and
conversation.
again, I think, I think everyone's situation and calling
There
is
we go.
different.
There we go. There we go.
And more just for me personally, I feel like in my own world, the space that I occupy,
Right.
I feel like I can meet people wherever they're at more effectively and in a safer way
Mm.
outside of the walls of an actual church building. And I think that if I'm going to use, kind of Christianese kind of language, I would use it here. I think that the Holy Spirit in this particular season is going to be moving and working in some unique ways in some very unique spaces that are not the institution of church.
Sarah, I just and I mean this. I'm not trying to be goofy or what. I just felt flooded with hope. I just
Okay,
felt flooded with hope. I mean, I can
perfect.
get there by protests. I get those things give me hope, but I just the way you worded that, the way the Spirit is working, I just got flooded with hope. This has been a good
Beautiful.
time.
Yeah,
This has been a good time, Sarah. Thank you.
sure. Thank you
I'm
for
gonna.
having me. This was
Oh,
awesome.
oh, fantastic. Hang
See,
around.
Facebook does have its
It
good
does.
points.
It does. It does. It does.